again, Robert, for joining us for this very nice discussion. Because when we read about your profile and your work, we were very happy that we could bring you aboard, and this is it. And thank you again. If you would like, I would like to begin with the anti-racistic monument. If you would like to tell us a bit about this project. And I found very interesting the concept of master narrative. I mean, is
Mhm.
this story one story that different people see it from different perspective? When I say people, I mean also stakeholders, more stiff language. But maybe you can tell me a bit about this project, and maybe we can just also discuss from a stakeholder point of view, public administration and artists or community or
Mhm.
civic society group. So thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, sure. I yeah, I think I should start by explaining my own part in that process, maybe. So I was part of the group that initiated the project, that took an initiative to create an anti-racist monument in Malmö. But I then left that collaboration cooperation because I felt that there were so many really powerful activists there, uh, while no one was really researching the process. So I thought it was better to distance myself from everything. And not, so I have not been part of the jury work, for example. I've not been selecting the monument or anything, or and so on. And then try to research it instead, and gather all the materials and kind of documenting the processes and so on. Uh, and another thing I realized was that there are so many similar processes going on, most of them outside of Sweden. This is very unique for Sweden. So I have also been trying to connect as a researcher with cases primarily in Germany, uh, and see kind of see the comparative aspects or dimensions. And one really interesting result is that many times, I mean, we tend to think about, how we address racism and its afterlives, and also, I mean, grievability and so on. We tend to reflect upon that in the context of a national memory culture. But I see so many similarities when I look at it at an urban level, across cities, across nations. So for me, it's super important to explore that context more. Like it's more, from my point of view, it's more urban dynamics that is decisive in, you know, yeah, I mean, in if a good memory culture and a reparative, process will take place or not. So that's my point of view and my positionality in a way. And then just to give you an overview of the process. So in Malmö is one of is a very interesting city to be living in. It's a post-industrial city. It's a post-migratory city. Half of the population is born outside of Sweden. People living here speak a lot of different languages. It's also a very young city. So people living here are younger than the mean in Sweden. So people are younger and also poorer. The population is poor. It's the only city with a population that gets poorer by the year in Sweden. Uh, and it has been so for a time. And then the city is also surrounded by this kind of urban noir, these kind of political uses of a city where in this discourse that we connect, multiculturalism, street violence, criminality to create a certain social imaginary. And the city has been used in those political discourses. Uh, and maybe because the city was already talked about in that way, uh, it became the site for a racist serial killer. Uh, so by making more violence in a secluded way that targeted racialized parts of the population, uh, he could advance an agenda. He could kind of advance this social imaginary because more violence was happening in this city, in those populations, and police and media and everyone just assumed that everyone that was targeted by his violence was that because they were already part of criminal networks because of how they were racialized in a way. So that happened, and he was active in the city for 7 years, and only in the last year, police and media kind of put the pieces together and realized that this is something out of the ordinary. It doesn't match the pattern. It's something we, yeah, must deal with. And then he was apprehended quite quickly, and he's now serving a lifetime in prison. Although in the trials, in the judicial aftermath, afterwork and work around it, he hate crime was never an issue. So the like kind of racist content of what he did has never been confronted. So okay, so one of the people that was attacked by him was a person who's become a friend of mine. His name is Kamal Masri, and he was 16 when he was shot. This was the first day his dad let him bike to a football practice alone, and he was shot in the head, but he survived. Uh, and then after the attack, he experienced and his family experienced all of these media reporting, like stressing the fact that he has been involved in criminal activities before, which actually was that he has, driven his friends on his moped without a helmet. But how it was framed in media was, made it seem like something much, much worse, right? So afterwards, he left Sweden with his mom because they felt that Lebanon was a safer place than Malmö, and they were living there for a long time. Uh, in the trials of this serial killer, the case was brought up, um, but he was never convicted, right, for the shooting. So he was never convicted on that point. Then what happened was that Kamal's older sister, Manal, she's a really good stage producer and a documentary filmer. So she started to exchange letters with the serial killer in prison, getting to know him. And after several, and she's documented all of this in a really good movie called Letters to a Serial Killer. So after a long time, he confessed the attack in one of the letters. And not only did he say that they did it, but he gave a detailed confession, containing details about how it went, how he did it, that he couldn't have, known. It matched it, so many other testimonies and so on. But still, the case was not reopened. So he's not still not been tried for this attack. Okay. So when all of this happened, the movie got out, and then, um, but it wasn't really debated in Sweden. It was awarded internationally, but it didn't really cause any public talk in Sweden, right? So then Manal thought we need a place for these experiences, a place where these experiences can be affirmed and confirmed and materialized and there, right? So she put together a group uh, of people, and I was one of them, right, to demand such a place. So we did that in an article in the local daily, came out in 2019 on the 1st of May. Uh, and after some initial quarreling with the municipal board, the city decided that they should sponsor this project. So they wanted to create an anti-racist monument. And after that, we started to work with the cultural department, and they started to investigate how such a monument could be made. And then, I mean, things took a very long time. I mean, also because the investigation was well made, of course. I mean, it took a long time. Then there came an election, and the culture department didn't want to push this project until the election was made and the new majority was stabilized and so on. And when everything was in order, they issued the call for an artistic competition. And the winners of that artistic competition was Susanna Jablonski and Santiago Mustin. And they proposed the monument master narratives. So that's a very, very quick timeline of the process. I think your questions about master narratives should rather be answered by the artists. I've interviewed them many times, but maybe they would give better answers. But the point is, I think that they put master narratives in plural to play with, what is a master narrative and can actually be more, and it's kind of a what. But I think they also do it because they want to not play with, but kind of reconfigure the monumental form, because they have been asked to do a very traditional type of monument. So it's very much like, yeah, this classical definition of display of power in place, right? So that's very much what they've been asked to contribute to do. So it's very much that type of a monument. It's not very much related to like the German tradition of counter monuments or negative space or anything like that. It's very much a traditional monument. It's going to take space. It's going to be erect. It's going to be, you know. Uh, so I think maybe the title is also a way to create a little crack, a little, in a way, in that form.
Yeah, wow. What what a story. I mean, what a narrative, so to speak. Yeah. Actually, the concept, I think maybe you can tell us more from a research point of view, because um, actually it's about monuments as negotiation, because you also mentioned all these talks and all this why not bureaucratic process that takes place, and in this negotiation actually is more than the funder or the artist. Is also the narrative or the story that addresses, or the problem, the issue that addresses, and then all the people that are involved, more or less, even if they are connected directly with this issue, or they just live in the city, or they just live in the neighborhood. So I was very interested in your academic research. How would you position this idea of a monument as a negotiation, so or a public art as a negotiation between all these stakeholders,
Mm.
as I mentioned? So maybe if I very much appreciate that you mentioned that you needed the research. Of course you do, and then you made a bird's eye view, so that you could understand better how people react to, I don't know, to public art that is in their way. I mean, they go to work, they see something, or it's near the park, they go, and so on and so forth. So maybe you can share a light or give some examples, or how on how you found this approach of narratives in your study.
Mm. Um, well, the monument isn't inaugurated yet, right? So it will be inaugurated this spring according to time plan, and then we will see how it's received. But it's already like active and creative in a way, because people, yeah, as you say, the stakeholders are engaged, different stakeholders with different positionalities and so on, and it creates things. So, for example, in this city, and like one of the school departments of the city, the municipal school department, there's a group with an anti-racist awareness, and they are now preparing, school programs, to use the space to create, yeah, to discuss racism and anti-racism with kids, with small children, so things are happening in that way. I know that there is an anticipation within the civil society or broader like public in the city. Um, but some has also been there are also critical voices, because when we inaugurated everything, when we in this process, right, when we started this process, we was very open with that we wanted like a very democratic, socially based process, and that has not really been part of the pro of what has happened, right? So it's not been very inclusive. It's been very arty and exclusive in a way. This is my reading at least. Which I mean, I'm still open for it to create effects, right? In a way, because art create effects in different kinds of effects, but that specific quality has not been there. Uh, so some people that thought that they were gonna now be given a chance to speak out and so on, take part and so on. They have been very critical about the project and say that this is not a monument for me, you know. It's not a monument that can express my experiences of being a person living in this very like
Sorry
racialized
to
city.
interrupt you. I mean, from an aesthetic point of view or from a concept point of view, the reactions?
Uh, Not aesthetic yet. I mean, it depends on what you mean by aesthetic, but I mean, because it's not there, so maybe they will see it as very like useful or effective in when it's there. I don't know. We'll see in the future, but more like how the process has been organized. So from an organizational point of view, and from also conceptual in a way, because how the the process have been talked about as open and community based, but I don't see that content really, you know what I mean? So there is a tension. And I think this has to do what you brought up about the administrative, structure and agency and so on, very much. But it also has to do with who has been commissioned to do the memory work. So very soon, I mean, of course, art was there from to begin with because we asked for a monument, right? So it's a work of public art. So it's been there from the start. Uh, but when it was brought into the municipality really used it to create a new agency for public art. So a case around which a new public agency for public art could be made. And also they needed within the administration, they needed to relocate the responsibility for public art from like a technical department to the cultural department. And this became a perfect trial case, one of a few trial cases to do that. I mean, and I don't moralize around that because I mean there are different stakeholders with different needs, and that was one of the needs that had to be fulfilled for the monument to be realized, right? So it's part of the play, or part of the process, but it kind of took the overhand, and it also coded everything uh, as art more than, for example, memory or reparation or anything else. Uh, so within that process, and you kind of we ended up in a situation where artists were commissioned to do the memory work, and artists were commissioned to do the memory work for the city, both as an organization for the municipality and for the broader public. So artists have been, they also did like a preparatory public exhibition, so an open air exhibition of public art, where they brought together a really interesting set of anti-racist artists from across Sweden, who got the chance to react and reflect and do things. And it created something. But in a way, it also kind of mm, built from local experiences and then which were refined as art and then brought back to the city as something that they could spectate rather than, express through, or it didn't make anyone express it out who wasn't a commissioned artist, right? That's what I'm saying. Uh, all while being talked about as community driven and reparative in a way. So what we have now is a situation where memory work has been professionalized. Mm, and actually, I don't see anything really happening in memory when there are no new memories being phrased, no new platforms risen for people to work through the memories, and the municipality hasn't really changed either. So you get a lot of, memory expressions, but I don't see the memory work. You know what I mean? In a way. So I think that's what it's produced, and I'm trying to understand how that happened. So.
Very interesting because actually you would think that the whole process should be twisted and changed. I mean, what comes first? Is
Mm,
it the funding body, which is the administration? Is the artists that come first and tackle the issue? Is the community that raises questions
mm,
or makes groups that discuss the issues? Actually, we are talking about public memory, how would
mm,
you shape it in the form of a monument? So
mm,
actually, how would you see this development actually? And how can actually the communities shape their own narratives? And uh, when when the communities in this long process can have their say, I mean, first the communities, then the artists, and then the commissioning, and or how would you say that this process would look like from a
mm,
research point of view? Why not? Or
mm,
an
mm.
anthropology point of view, in order to get the most out of this public memory. So how would you see this process?
Mm, that's the question I'm trying to answer. Because it's really hard. I think that's what I have now. I mean, kind of recognition of how hard that is. I mean, from any individual position. Like if you're an artist, you want to do things, you want to contribute, but you're limited in your capacity to do things. As a civil servant, you have the same situation, right? In a way, you want to do things, but you're in this political administrative structure and so on. And so so how to do this? I'm right now. I'm trying to just to recognize. I mean, how hard it is for everyone involved, right? And then also to match their different expectations and needs and so on. This is not easy, and it's really important to keep that in mind, right? And sometimes when you do these things, maybe you learn more from the failures than, in a way, because that's also a way to create a kind of negative space, right? To looking at the failures or at the cracks in a way. And I think that reparation happens when you manage to, you know, articulate. I mean, James Young would say it's when you articulate a void without filling it, right? In a way. So looking at the failures is a way to bring memory back in a way, I think. But to answer your question a bit better, this is also where my comparative works come in, because I see different outcomes in different cities, and I can see similar patterns of failures in across cities as well. Um, so I think that what's super important is what type of publics you can mobilize and who controls those publics. So I'm often comparing to a case in Cologne. In Cologne, they will inaugurate a public monument, an artwork called Das antirassistische Mahnmal an der Kolbstraße. So they also call it an anti-racist monument, which is interesting. And it's commemorating an attack that happened at the same time as in Malmö. So it's very similar in time frames and and everything. But what happened in Malmö was that um, the municipality created a public, and we used the municipality's spaces. So the public library, the municipal Kunsthall, for example. I mean, all of those things. While in Cologne, everything was kind of initiated from within the municipality, which is different from Malmö, right? Because there was initiated from civil society. And then the municipality couldn't deliver because they couldn't challenge land ownership and so on in a gentrifying part of the city. And then it became a social movement, right? So the issue became like part of the civil society so there a different public kind of emerged and was, which was much more autonomous. And I don't know because in Malmö soon we will have a monument. In Cologne, they still don't have a monument. But in Malmö we don't have memory. In Cologne they have a lot of memory, right? and a lot of reparation, I would say as well, because through the social movement, those affected by the attack have been able to come together and then reconnect with society in different parts of society in a way. So I don't know which way, but it's super interesting to discuss these cases together, I think. And there is another thing, and that is uh, um, you usually don't, I mean, these types of attacks from racist attacks from the far right, in at least, I don't know, where I live, have not been part of collective memory. You know, we have a long, long history of violent attack from, it's been the most common form of political violence. And there's also deadly attacks. I mean, in Sweden, you don't maybe have that perspective, the view, that, knowledge in a way. But also in Germany, where there has been even more attacks after the Second World War as well, it's not really part of collective memory. And because of that, when every time it happens, it's like it's happening for the first time. And police and everyone are always missing the same types of clues or, everything and so on. Uh, and I was so struck last summer because there came I saw a posting on social media, and it was from one of the art magazine, a Swedish art magazine called Konstnären, so the artist. So it's and they made a posting about the monument. So they have interviewed the two artists who are making the monument in Malmö, and then they made a posting about it on Instagram. Uh, and it was interesting to read this posting, because first they said that the monument was meant to remind and work through the attacks by Peter Mangs, so they named the perpetrator, and then they named his agenda, so that's now remembered, his name and his agenda. And then they say it was initiated by an association created by or helped by the municipality. So the association, the municipality is there, it's a hero. And then it was made by a group of activists. And those activists are not named, and their motivations are not addressed. So it's not like it was just an idea that came up, we need to do this. It was very idealistic in a way in this posting. And then if you want to know more about it, you can click on the link and come to the artists. So the artists are the ones who will solve everything. So based on that, I mean, I think that posting might be a good evidence for the memory that this process has achieved. You know what I mean? The public memory that this process has actually achieved. And I don't exclude that when it's there, it will do more things locally, right? But that's where we are standing right now. So I think this is super important and interesting, and it has to do with what publics are open up and who controls them. That would be my answer.
Very interesting. So actually you can miss the point while doing it. I mean, it's crazy how you can extract information and then put it selectively.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. But I also found when following your work, this idea of sharing authority. So actually, this is what we are talking about, how you actually because we used a lot this idea of stakeholders, because it appears also in community work, that you take as many stakeholders as you can, and then you actually make a shared platform for all of them to put forward their narratives or their demands and so on and so forth. And maybe you can tell us a bit about the project Gathered Voices of Malmo, or Malmo Life Stories, maybe from this point of view of sharing authority, and why not all this well, desired ongoing negotiation when you talk about public memory.
Oh, yes, good. So shared authority is a concept that comes out of oral history. So it was first formulated quite differently. So the first formulation of the concept was a shared authority. So a shared, and then you went from a shared authority to sharing authority, right? So a shared authority was a phrase coined by Michael Frisch, and he is an American historian. He has a book named, yeah, A Shared Authority, essays on oral and public history or something like that. And in his version, he's kind of recognizing that, I mean, that history is always a socially situated activity or product. Uh, but you see that more clear in oral history and public history because then you're actually working with another person in a way. Um, so for him, it's more like a critical concept, right? So it's like authority is always shared. And he what we found in the Gathered Voices of Malmö was that we wanted to use this idea or notion as our theory or whatever as we worked. But then we realized that we couldn't really do that because I mean we could use the content, the idea, but we couldn't use the concept because it can't it don't translate into Swedish. Because in when you translate authority to Swedish, you get like you get the power aspects of it, the power dimension, like auktoritet and so on. Uh, but you miss the pun on author or the pun, that it's also about who writes things. And yeah, you can't say that in Swedish. You can't say that in the same. You could. There is a very technical word, auktoritativitet, but that's even harder to understand than the English word, like in Swedish. Okay, so that's what he had, Michael Frisch, a shared authority, a critical concept to kind of pinpoint how things are happening, especially in oral history. But then, of course, when researchers after him had, he made people aware of a certain thing with this concept, then they wanted to draw the ethical implications of it. So then it became a sharing authority instead. So like an ethical concern or a statement or an approach more. So you have now two different versions of it, like a critical concept and something that you want to achieve in a way. And yeah, I think what we realized, we hadn't really reflected upon this before starting to work in Malmö. The work we did in Malmö, just to give you context then, was that we brought together a huge group of civil society partners, and I brought them to Malmö University. And there were also other stakeholders in the group that were like museum professionals and so on. And then we made contact with, I have made contact with a group of researchers in Canada, in Montreal, because they had done a live story project with that city's diasporic communities. So they were here to help us get starting. And everyone who came to the room, I didn't really have an agenda except that we need come here if you're interested in working with live stories in a city that is often, stigmatized in a way. So that was the only starting point we had. So how can we do this? What do we want to do? And then we had help from the people in Montreal, and they had created a theory which we kind of wanted to, or a practice rather. They created a practice which we wanted to kind of try to introduce in Malmö, uh, or interpret and receive in a way. Uh, so their idea was that they wanted to scale the insights from an individual oral history interview to a much larger collaboration and see what a shared authority then meant or how it could inform that type of work. So what they did was that they decided on a common theme, and in their case it was just life stories. It was very broad. And then they decided that they realized that if everyone in their group in Montreal had an interest in life stories, but for very different reasons. So some were researchers, some were community organizers within diaspora communities, some were museum and other institutions, but everyone had this common interest. And then if they started to work together, um, to learn more about how to do life stories for their different reasons. They could work productively together without kind of objectifying each other or in a way, because everyone was creating something for themselves. So no one was participating in the other's project. But it was meaningful for them to be together because they needed to learn from each other and together in a way about this common interest. So and they could learn more by bringing. So they had created this model, and then they had other things like begin before you begin and put relationality first, build relationships, and then you see what you want to do together in a way, and so on, and a lot of different. So we were trying to work according to the same structure in a way, and then see what came out of it and how it could help us in Malmö. And then we realized, of course, that we couldn't translate a shared authority into Swedish. So my research from this process was more like, what did the group in Malmö say instead? And how does that reflect back on the theory that we were given? So instead of, translate the shared authority, how did they interpret it and how does it reflect back in a way? So there's something there around like putting community first in a way, because I think that they didn't want to learn together or from each other. Learning was never became the core value. The core value became care instead, and sharing stories as a way to care for each other. So they wanted to care for each other's stories. That's what they wanted to do, more than learn anything about them or from them. And then, of course, we also learned about how to do that in a way. So the development was more practical or methodological or something like that. So it was about putting community first, but then also about thinking about what community means in a way. So community then could mean like um, one definition, one understanding of community would be like a diachronic or transhistorical uh, belonging, right? So you feel that you belong to an experience or a community, and that's quite vague, of course. I mean, it has a lot of the problems that also identity have, and so. But I mean, it's there. Another is more synchronic, so it's like belonging to often it's a locality, right? So the community around a place or a neighborhood or something like that. But then the third definition is what I find more interesting, and it's community as a practice. So community as an approach, or community as making together, right? So making together, and that means both making togetherness and making collectively, right? So when you combine them. So I found that being, so if you put that principle in center and relationality in the center, then other things fall into place around it. Uh, so, but then you also must code. I think that's super important. You must code the space that you open up. You hold a space for that type of process, but you must code it in a certain way, right? And that place will get that space will get their community content if you can show that people can be there as embodied persons, full humans with needs, right? So the space we used, it was a very interesting space called the Museum of Movements. Uh, and it was super important that they had like microwaves so you could easily bring your kid and heat their food, right? I mean, and everything that you can be there and in a way that it's not disturbing if you don't know if you have a need, if you have a body, you can use the bathroom, you can, so it's a community space in that way. But that you also might get from a public library, or you might get it from a social center, or from, so it's super important to also code the space for a certain activity. So people know that when you step into this space, you will get something special and you're expected to deliver something special, which is culture and knowledge in our case then. So in a way. So you can, yeah, build around that then. So I think that was the key insight from that process. And then at first it I was so happy because it grew really big. We had more than 100 participants from civil society groups. It was, and everyone was so engaged. And we made new contacts each week with new groups, and I learned so much from that. And then the pandemic came. We really couldn't work relationally, so we had to go digital and there were a much smaller group that could make that transition in a meaningful way. Uh, so what in the end what the process produced was new networks, new connections, but also new practices within different civil society groups, and also a new group, which we called Arkiv för alla, Archives for All. So because what we had in the end of the process was the beginning maybe of a community archive, working with live stories and so on. And then we kind of we thought that we were going to create like an association where we would continue working together, but it became more meaningful for everyone to continue working with these things in their different associations or communities and so on, and then have more of a coalition in a way that came together and continued to share insights and questions and yeah. So it's like a research circle or something like that that goes on called Arkiv för alla. So that's the result. Yeah, something like that.
Very nice. So actually, because the question was, what comes first? How would a perfect or ideal process would begin? But as you were speaking, I was thinking that maybe the starting point would be these very community archives. I mean,
Mhm.
actually, when you want to have an embodiment of a public memory, then you should start with this very thing, like gathering this type of community, because I was thinking that actually maybe more from a project management point of view,
Mm,
you should make a leap of faith. I mean, to have this uncertainty that you wouldn't know what will come
mm,
out of these community gatherings, and then building up these archives, you can't tell. You wouldn't know because it's very unexpected and it's very um, uh, human,
mm,
human-based archive. So this would be very interesting to take into account as a starting point for a process that would be meaningfully involving community. So actually, you would have an issue, then you have to name it, because as you said, you have to name the problem. I mean, like always, it was racist. A murder, or just a normal one. So actually, when naming it, then you have to circle about it again and again, so that you can have a meaningful building up of finally, why not public art or monument. And I really much enjoy the idea of coding the space. And when you are using this concept, you also uh, can you apply it for outdoor, for public spaces? So not only spaces that you label that as community points, or you transform that as some community points, or you can also have these public spaces, because we keep addressing what is a public space. Is it
mm,
owned by everyone? Who is
mm,
everyone? Is the
mm,
neighbors? Is the passersby? Is those that are
mm,
born there, or they came in, I know, to stay or for a temporary visit? So
mm,
can we code spaces within public spaces? And would this coding stay, or it will evolve
mm,
in time?
mm. Yeah, that's a really good question. It's easier, I think, when you work in a room, right? So it's very much I'm now in urban humanities. That's what I do now. I'm research coordinator for urban humanities, and that's so interesting because I get to work with the architects, and that's so good, you know. I think it's easier when you work in a room in a way because then the room in itself becomes like a collector of all the experiences of what's happening in there. It grows. The room itself becomes sort of an archive in a way because you come back to the same space, you do the same things and similar thing. I mean, and then you get an aggregation of experiences and knowledge. I haven't never done it outdoors. I'm really intrigued to do like an outdoor exhibition or something like that. It would be so interesting to do to see if what we can do. But I think it's then maybe if you work around something like community kitchens or something, because that would really code it as community, and then so it's right because you need to code it as community and as something else, a special type of community space in a way. I have a friend, he's in community theater. He's a stage director who came into community theater, and he started to work with youths in Malmö. And he has an institutional background. He's been at all the big stages and so on. But then at some point he decided that this is what I want to do. I want to be here instead. So, and then at first he came like approach these people as, yeah, well, I might be an artist, but I'm also a common guy. I have, everything like that. And it didn't really take off. And then he tried instead to say like, I'm a really good, stage producer. I know how to do these things. I'm one of the best in Sweden, and now I want to work with you. In a way. So, and I'm telling you this because it's a way, it illustrates the need to code, right? And so it's a way of saying that if you're in this relationship or in this space, it will give you something special, and it will expect something special from you. So yeah, that's an illustration of that principle in a way. It would be super interesting to see. I mean, we always have this question that you put, like how do we keep uh, loading, for example, a public work of art with meaning or and so on. So yeah, do a community kitchen around a public work of art and see what happens. And also, I mean, do we still need the word public in public space? Is that, I mean, for example, Jane Rendell suggests that we get rid of the word public in public space because why? Who is a public and what is semi-public? And she suggested we use the concept of critical spatial practice instead. So a critical spatial practice would be another way to pinpoint that special place, outdoors or indoors, but and I guess differentiate from another artwork or another place that might look public but maybe isn't, or you know what I mean? So you can see what spaces have different qualities and possibilities, and yeah, I don't know.
Thank you so much, Robert. It was quite a nice, interesting conversation. Hopefully not only for our listeners, but also for myself, because I have these issues. Whose space is this? I mean, I go through whose space is this? Who owns it? Who can take it over? Is it legal? It is only okay. I'm an artist. I take it over and then I apologize. And so all these different types of issues we have discussed during this project, apropos legislation of public space. What is it in Romania? What is it in Republica Moldova? Do I have, I mean, it's public, it's ours, but I have to get permission to do something. What is that something? Is it artsy? Is it community? If this is community-based practice, why should I have an agreement or an authorization for this because it's my space, and so on and so forth. So that's why
Mm.
I really enjoy this idea of coding this space, because when you have a public monument, you can say, this is a coded space. I mean, this represents something. This embodies, as you say, embodies a certain concept or issues. Or I think this is the hardest part, how you encode something within an art form, and then what is the reception of it? I mean, maybe you gather loads of information from this, why not archives, community archives, and then you embody it, and then there comes by other communities says, no, this is not what I think, and so on. So actually it keeps changing. I mean, you have it on spot, okay, everything is ready, the process was long, stakeholders were involved, but then it keeps living actually. So you can have, why not, artistic intervention on that very monument. So it keeps it keeps telling other stories, not only the story that you wanted to embody there and then. So yeah, you have a lot of work to do further on, apropos urban humanities that you mentioned as a field. So yeah, thank you, Robert. If you have any final remarks, if not, we can conclude our wonderful conversation, and hopefully we have another one soon.
Yeah, hopefully. Thank you for the invitation. I'm really enjoyed.